If you're City through and through, hit the like button now and subscribe because the next pieces of information might sound separate, but when you put them together, you can feel that January could flip a huge switch in the squad. And I'm not talking about transfer gossip. This is backstage movement, a development plan, a defensive piece that could leave, and a $35 million target suddenly showing up strongly on the radar. So stay with me right to the end, because in the middle of this puzzle there's one detail that changes how you read everything. Let's start with what stands out most when you look inside the club. What happens to a young talent when a loan spell doesn't deliver what was promised in practice? Because on paper, the idea of placing a kid in a competitive environment with elite training and weekly demands sounds perfect. But real football isn't a lab. It's minutes on the pitch. It's confidence. It's rhythm. And that's exactly where Claudio Echevarri's case has started to get delicate. City got into this with a clear plan. Polish a young player without pulling him out of the European circuit, keeping him close to the style of play the club values, and, at the same time, allowing him to mature away from the Etihad spotlight. But the loan didn't become the road it looked like. It became a waiting room. And when you're 18, 19, and what you need most is to be playing, watching matches from the bench isn't a process, it's a break, and you can understand the frustration. It's not just an athlete's ego, it's the development clock. There are players who, when they click early, gain game understanding, make decisions faster, learn how to handle tough matches. And there are players who, after months without rhythm, start to lose timing, lose trust in their own movements, start playing carefully, even in training. And nobody wants that with an asset at this level. That's why, behind the scenes, January starts to look like the moment to correct the route. Not as punishment for the club he's with, and not as public drama, but as a smart adjustment. And here's an important detail. City don't want this story to slide into a rushed return to South America just because it's where he feels comfortable. Of course, River Plate has emotional pull, context, the beginning of everything. But from City's point of view, what matters is testing him at the pace that produces players for the Premier League and the Champions League. Intensity, tactical demand, off-ball reading, high pressing, recovery runs, decision-making under stress. And that's why the clause a lot of people treat as bureaucracy has gained real weight, the possibility of a recall. City can, if they want, pull the player back mid-season and choose a different path. And when a club that size keeps full control like that, it's a sign nobody is going to stand still if they feel the development has stalled. Then comes the part that makes this story much more interesting. Girona. Because when we talk about a loan within the City Football Group ecosystem, it isn't just any loan. There's alignment in the model. There's close monitoring. There's direct communication. There's a football idea that speaks the same language. And Girona, beyond being in a league that demands technique and intelligence, play a style that could suit an attacking midfielder who needs to be near the ball, breathe in possession, but also learn to be aggressive at the right moments. Think with me. What does a youngster like Echevarri need most right now? He needs to feel the game goes through him at times. He needs to make mistakes without being buried. He needs to get things right and be rewarded with more minutes. He needs to learn to drift between the lines, receive under pressure, protect the ball, find the vertical pass. And most of all, he needs to play. Not pretty training sessions, not highlight clips. Real matches, week after week, with crowds, pressure, and accountability. And that's where Girona starts to make sense from multiple angles at once. For City, it's security. You keep close tabs, you adjust the plan, you protect the sporting investment. For the player, it's a real opportunity. If the manager trusts him and the context helps, he can get consistency. For the fans, it's the kind of move that looks simple, but it's what separates the youngster who explodes from the youngster who gets lost along the way. And there's one more point you can't ignore. When talk emerges that the player himself would already be on board with the change and with ending the current loan early, that suggests the decision isn't purely administrative. It's personal. It's the player looking at reality and saying, I need the next step now. And when a player that young has that awareness, the club tends to move quickly, because it's better to correct early than try to rescue confidence too late. Now, I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If you were City, would you place Echevarri at Girona so he gets minutes and maturity, or would you try a different type of loan outside the group to test him in a less controlled environment? But while this story looks like it's about the future and development, on the other side there's a much more immediate pressure, the present, because the season doesn't wait. The race at the top doesn't wait. And as much as City have the quality to decide matches going forward, there's a sign you notice when you look closely. At certain moments, the team wobbles defensively, and when a title-chasing team wobbles at the back, the market becomes temptation. It's not panic, it's pragmatism. It's that cold logic. Where can we improve with the right piece? And when a name valued at $35 million appears, already proven in the Premier League, with leadership, maturity, and a profile that fits playing out and controlling space, you understand why the conversation grows. The name is Marc Guéhi, Crystal Palace captain. And this isn't just about a good center-back. It's about profile. Because there are center-backs who just clear the ball and survive. And there are center-backs who organize, calm the team, choose the right moment to step up, don't panic when pressed, position themselves to offer a pass and start the move. And that's the type of defender Pep tends to like. When City attack, they often defend with the ball. But when the match turns into a scrap, when the opponent finds transitions, when the game opens up too much, the defense gets tested on split-second decisions. And in those moments, having one more elite option isn't a luxury. It's depth, it's rotation, it's keeping the standard even with absences, even with a heavy calendar, even with tactical tweaks. And there's a detail that makes it feel even more real. Liverpool would have tried something before, would have come close, and didn't get it done. In the market, that often functions like a stamp of validation. It doesn't mean the player is going, but it does mean he's on the biggest club's radar for a reason. And Palace, on their side, aren't a club that lets go easily, especially mid-season when every point matters. That's why people talk about that figure, something around 35 million, to take him from there. And it might sound like a lot if you glance at it, but think about the cost of not having cover when any wobble becomes a headline. Think about the cost of losing key set-piece duels. Think about the cost of not being able to rotate while keeping leadership at the back. Those costs are sometimes invisible, but at the end of the road, they get paid. And then the story brushes up against another point hovering around the corridors, Nathan Ake's situation. Because Ake is the kind of player who, for a long time, meant reliability. He's not the loudest, not the most hyped, but he's the one who comes in and delivers. He plays center back. He plays left back. He understands the system. He does the tactical job. He doesn't overcomplicate things. But top squads work like this. The pecking order shifts fast. You add competition, you add returning players, you add a new arrival, and suddenly the space shrinks. Today, with options like Ruben Dias and Gvardiol often ahead, with other alternatives emerging, and with the fight for minutes getting more ruthless, it's natural for Ake to wonder where he fits in the bigger picture. And I'm not saying he wants out as a locked fact. I'm saying when a player realizes he could spend months as a third or fourth choice, the market starts whispering in his ear. And football is built on those whispers. There's been talk of interest coming from Spain. And when Spain enters the chat, it adds a different flavor because the style changes, the routine changes, the level of protagonism can change. And if a La Liga giant looks at a versatile, experienced defender like Ake, it's because they see immediate use, especially when the manager on that side values discipline, strength in duels, and the ability to play more than one role. And that leaves City facing a familiar dilemma. Keep a useful player, even with reduced minutes, or take a strong offer, raise funds, and reinvest in someone more aligned with what the squad will need in the coming months. Pep, historically, doesn't like losing pieces in January, but City also don't tend to block a move when it makes financial and sporting sense, especially if the player himself pushes for more space elsewhere. Now, for the fans, the point is simple and complicated at the same time. If Ake leaves, you need a replacement. And if you need a replacement, Guéhi starts to look even more coherent. See how the stories connect? The young talent who needs minutes and could go to Girona, the center back who could arrive for 35 million, and the defender who could become a target for a Spanish giant. They're not three random headlines. It's one board rearranging itself. So I'm going to ask you directly, no messing about. Do you think City should keep a key at all costs because of his tactical usefulness? Or if an offer comes in at the right level, would you sell and go hard for Guehi to refresh the defense with a younger leader? And that's why, when you put the pieces together, January stops being just a transfer window and becomes a month of decisions that can shift the present and the future at the same time. On one side, a young talent like Claudio Echevarri needing real minutes in an environment that accelerates his adaptation to European football, with Girona emerging as a logical, safe, and, most importantly, useful route so he doesn't stall at a crucial stage of his development. On the other side, the need to keep City strong and stable in the biggest fight, with the defense being judged at the highest level every week, and the possibility of a ready-made reinforcement, leader, proven in the Premier League, like Marc Guehi gaining traction precisely because he brings the kind of consistency that decides seasons. And in the middle of all that, Nathan Ake's situation sits there like the factor that can turn talk into a concrete move. Because when a player who's been important starts to have less space, the market notices. Spain looks, giants start moving, and City, who usually don't like reshaping the squad mid-season, might end up having to choose between keeping him for security or selling for sporting and financial balance. If a strong bid arrives, if the player wants a new challenge, and if the club believes they can replace him with quality, then the gears turn. And when City's gears turn, they rarely do it slowly. So the question, City fan, which of these decisions do you think changes City's direction the most right now? Sending Echevarri into a project where he genuinely plays and returns more ready? Investing heavily in Guehi to strengthen the defense and add depth? Or keeping Ake at all costs so you don't open a gap at the most sensitive point of the season? Drop your opinion in the comments because I want to read your view on the whole board, not just one isolated name. And if this video helped you understand what's behind these headlines, do the basic thing that strengthens the channel. Hit the like button now and subscribe so you don't miss any update, because when January arrives, things can speed up in a way nobody expects.